a girl has gone on a great first date, first date, magical. What would you tell her to do? Does she text first? Does she wait for him? What do you say?
I would say you would do nothing at first.
Yay! Dear Shandy. Welcome back to Dear Shandy, listeners. Hello, Andy.
Hello.
I'm jittery with excitement.
Yeah, we're both a little excited and nervous
I'm
because
nervous.
There's so much. This is such a powerful person.
Yes. I'm particularly excited. There's actually some backstory to our guest today because I saw her on TV before I ever went on TV. And then when I did DM her asking her if she would come on our podcast, she was like, I saw you on TV. And I was like, oh my God. But before we bring on Tracy McMillan, I have to give a little roundup of her incredible resume. First up, she is a TV writer, first and foremost. So she has written on Mad Men, United States of Tara, Life on Mars, among many, many others. So very impressive right there off the bat. She's the author of the iconic relationship book, Why You're Not Married, ... yet. Read it.
Not sponsored. Read it. Read it.
Which interestingly was published in 2012, correct?
Yeah.
And that will come into play in our conversation today. I'm very interested to talk about the time lapse since 2012. And this book was based on her viral Huffington Post article called Why You're Not Married, which for 2 years was the most viewed article on Huffington Post.
Amazing.
Wrap your mind around that for a second. It's pretty crazy. And she also has a memoir, I Love You and I'm Leaving You Anyway, which is in the coffee table right now. And a debut novel. You'll know it when you see it. She's an incredible writer. And I think that's one of the reasons why I'm as nervous as I am. Because we've had some famous people on this podcast. But I get really wowed and starstruck when I really admire someone's writing and what they have to say.
Yeah, I won Charlene over with my initial texts. That was it. No looks, no personality, just texts.
And so when I saw her on TV, she was one of 3 matchmakers on NBC's Ready for Love, which I ate up, by the way, right before I applied to be on The Bachelor. So that's when I saw her on TV. She was incredible on that show. Her TED Talk, titled The Person You Really Need to Marry, has a whopping 16 million views on YouTube. And she continues to share her sharp insights on the regular on her Instagram at Tracy McMillan. And I'm just so thrilled that she has chosen to join us today. Thank you so much, Tracy.
Thank you.
I'm so happy to be here. It's weird to hear you say all those things. I'm like, wow, that's kind of, I've done some interesting things. And I don't really think of it like that at all. So
what I especially love is it's so eclectic. It's not all just one field. You know, a TV writer unto itself is like, wow, what a career. But then you also have this whole side thing as a relationship expert.
Yeah.
Which I think, honestly, the separate career lends to your abilities as a relationship expert.
No question about that. I mean, I will say the relationship experting part. So before I wrote scripted television, I wrote television news for 16 years. And I was forever in, newsrooms are big, giant rooms filled with single people, basically. And there's some married people in there too. But I would be having these conversations with the reporters and the other writers about their relationships. And so sometimes I just sort of feel like this is what I've been doing all along, is talking to women and men about their relationships. And eventually someone just brought a camera. That's kind of how I look at it. But it doesn't matter where I am. That's the conversation I'm going to be having, whether it's a scripted television writer's room or whether I'm standing in line at Target or whether I'm on TV. So it's just my favorite conversation to have. And it's where I get, I don't know, I guess it's where my gift is and my challenge. So those two things often line up,
Definitely. And it takes humility to admit the challenge part, in my opinion.
And a lot of mistakes along the way.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And you don't ever have to feel bad about your mistakes. You just don't want to repeat them over and over. Exactly. So it's like, what do we have to do to not repeat the mistake?
Exactly. And I just want to have a disclaimer before we start this conversation that much of the language we'll be using will be about straight couples. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of the messaging with our conversation today will be between men and women. I just think it's important to say that up front because
I know, I like that you're saying that. I would amend that slightly to say it's between, I would look at it like this. It's really not necessarily heteronormative. It's more about masculine energies and feminine energies.
Yes.
So it doesn't really matter
to.
gender or orientation. It matters which energy you embody. So
Exactly.
when I'm saying, what I mean is feminine energy. Sometimes if I'm saying women or men, I mean feminine energy or masculine energy. And that could be no matter, who you are.
Love that you added that because we will touch on that. And I do think, like you said, everything we're going to discuss can apply to all genders.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wanted to get that out of the way first.
Yeah, that's great. I appreciate that.
So right off the bat, we are going to talk a lot about your book, even though I know
Sure.
you've written 2 other books, but of course, this is a relationship podcast. And I do think this is one of those books that's like a giant nodding in agreement. Like,
Yeah, that's the whole time. Just like your neck gets sore from the nodding.
and you kind of want to ship it to your single girlfriends, but then you feel like maybe you shouldn't.
It's like a Gideon's Bible. It should be in like every bedside table.
That's funny.
So obviously the book is about the mistakes people make. But what I wanted to hear from you is 9 years later, approximately, I wanted to know if out of those 10 chapters, which are really 10 reasons why someone is not yet married, what do you think are the most common mistakes people make?
I often think that, it's so hard to say what the most common things are because there's like big picture mistakes and then smaller picture mistakes. So I'm going to say in the big picture, the thing that people really don't do is have a relationship end and then turn within and go, how did I create this? What beliefs do I have? What patterns of my beliefs and my life are showing up in this relationship that just ended? Because there's always something to learn and it's always going to be something in me. So, you have friends, they have breakups, and there's basically kind of 2 responses. There's, I turned within to look at myself and deal with whatever I need to deal with in order to move forward without doing that same behavior or creating that same relationship. Or there's some version of, she's crazy, he's an asshole. And when people are like, well, I kind of just think he's an asshole, they don't learn anything. And they're going to repeat it. Now, they may not repeat precisely what they just did, but they're going to repeat some new version of what they just did or some new version of their own belief system. So that to me is the biggest mistake people make, is just going through their relationships as if they are not the common denominator and as if everything is out there. And if you could only change the world, you would be different. And that's never, ever the case.
Well, it's interesting.
Such a good answer.
She's good. When you get out of a relationship, you're so wounded and your emotions are all over the place. It's very hard to sit down and do an unbiased postmortem.
Yeah.
It's obviously you're trying to protect your ego, or you're just trying some form of protecting your ego.
Yeah.
You're either blaming it on the guy completely, or as you said, you're blaming it on yourself. And I'm wondering what the best strategy is. I guess you have to do work on yourself as a person before you actually do the work of the relationship.
Yes. There's a weird paradox where you can't really practice relationships on your own, but you have to do enough work on your own to be able to practice well once you're in a relationship. I sometimes think, as I'm listening to you talk, that people's relationships are as functional or the quality of your relationships is very much related to the quality of your best friends. Because a lot of times at the end of the relationship, you might be all confused, but your friends are probably going to be able to tell you, you know what, here's what we saw happen. You know, I always say that Why You're Not Married, the viral piece, was simply me saying what everybody around you wished they could say without having you excommunicate them.
Yeah, you are the best friend. You're the friend that everyone needs.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm like your best friend, big sister, auntie, whatever that is for you, I'm her.
She's the friend who tells you your breath is bad, your clothes are ugly,
There's something in your teeth.
You've got terrible dandruff, like everything you don't get from your friend.
It's weird because I'm not really that person in any other area, but in this area, I have I just get the insights, and I'll be like, but wait, it was like this, or you said this. Like I had a friend once who broke up with this husband. Now, everyone knew the husband was like a mess. We'll just call him a mess. Suddenly, she's like, well, he's a mess. I'm like, wait, was this news? Like, you must have known this, right? Because it was right. It's not like he changed. He did not change. Right. So I just think, here's the other part. I'm not here to be too sassy because no one sees anything until they're ready to see it. People have their own timelines. Like I even know that the body and the psyche has its own wisdom, that you really don't see something until you are ready to handle it. So if something's coming up for you, it's like, oh, I must be ready for this because here it is. And nothing is ever like too soon or too late. I say things are on time and in time. And that's everything, the breakups, the relationships, everything that happens. I have a spiritual view of relationships and life. And in a spiritual view, there's I almost see it as a universe or a galaxy. It's like everything's in its right place. It's like, how do we send up a rocket and it gets there 12 years later on time? You're like, how'd that happen? Well, because there's an order and everything's moving in an ordered way. I like to think that life is that way too. And that when you align yourself with what's highest in you, you start to create different kinds of relationships and different opportunities come into your life, things that couldn't have happened before you were more aligned. Yeah. So how does the alignment work? Well, whatever messy shit's going on in your life right now is there for you to deal with so that you kind of tune the radio station of you in a little bit. Do we have radio anymore? We have Spotify.
Podcast.
So that you get rid of the static, and you start to tune in more to what's highest in you and what your bigger potential is in any given area, but in particular in relationships. And you'll know that because you'll start attracting different kinds of people and be attracted to different kinds of people.
Most importantly. Yep.
Just so much I want to say even based on that. I really do love the spirituality aspect of this book. And I have to say that as someone who I don't really consider myself that spiritual a person, but it really spoke to me in this book because it really felt like you were giving actual tools and awareness on how to work on little things that extend far beyond just relationships, really. What I love about your messaging is it really is more about a relationship with oneself.
Right, because you're picking, as you said in the book, and I'm paraphrasing terrifically, but basically you're picking someone like yourself. You're picking yourself in your partner. And if your self is damaged and if your self has all these faults, you're going to get that. And you're going to keep getting a whole row of them until you change it.
Yeah.
The famed psychologist Carl Jung had this theory that your partner is you. Well, if you're a woman and you're heterosexual, your partner is you as a man. And you are your partner as a woman. Okay. And so there's a way that partners carry an energy of ours and mirror it to us. And when you look at the couples, and then you can see when people are aligned and also when they're not, you're like, oh, I remember being in a relationship once where people were like, yeah, we never really got you guys together. And I'm like, right, because that wasn't me as a man. It just wasn't. It was a piece of me as a man, but it wasn't like the whole me as a man, so it's our partners are mirrors and on so many levels. That's just one of them.
It's so, and now We've been now together 7.5 years, Shandy, approximately.
Wow, is it that long?
I know. Scary, right?
You're basing it on when her season happened, right?
I know. I'm like, that was that long ago? Wow.
I know.
Really scary. I actually met him the March. So that my season aired in January 2014, and then I met him in March. So right after my season wrapped airing. And we joke all the time that we're basically the same person, just in a man and woman's bodies. So I concur with what you're saying.
And it is interesting when we go out with couples, there is that like the disturbance in the force. There's something wrong, like that doesn't flow. And the opposite when it's right, when it's the same, when you're with a unit, it flows so easily. It's very interesting.
So now you're touching on the attachment piece to me, and in a secure functioning relationship, as opposed to an insecure functioning relationship. So there's basically two kinds of relationships, secure and insecure. And in insecure, there's two different kinds of insecurities, but we can just put a pin in that for a second. When you're around people who are in a secure relationship, you feel relaxed and secure, and there's a flow. And because there's a flow between the two of them. And when people are in an insecure relationship, you can feel that too, because there's not that kind of flow. There might be a disconnect, or sometimes there's bickering, or not even just bickering, but like something more that feels not relaxed, you know?
Anyone who's ever been on a double date, like an awkward double date, I think knows exactly what you're talking. You can't necessarily put your finger on it. You just know that it's uncomfortable.
There's a blockage.
It's like the weather.
Like a bowel blockage.
There are different ways.
It's blocked. You feel blocked. You're
yes,
bloated.
That's right. It's like a block. You can feel it. And it could be, it could have any kind of tone to it, but there's just an overall sense of like, I don't feel relaxed, you know? Yeah. Like if you were there, I mean, I want to say like, couples have a tone to them, and people have a tone. And a lot of what you create in your life is coming from whatever your tone is. So whenever there's trouble in the relationships, I always know that there's something in here that needs to get addressed. And that's really what the book is sort of about. And here are some of the big things that people need to address.
And what I really love is that really comes down to some degree of taking responsibility.
Oh, 100%. I think you have to take responsibility for 100% of everything that's in your life. Like, there's never a victim. You know, there's a saying, there are no victims, only volunteers. I mean, it doesn't mean there aren't abusive relationships, but we are adults. You know, we do have choices. There's an interesting thing where children and teenagers, when they're in family systems, because oftentimes what we do in our adult relationships is we recreate the tone of our family home. It might not be the details of it, but it will be, we feel the way we felt. And if you want to know how you felt as a child, oftentimes just look at certain aspects of your relationship and you'll be like, oh, that's how I felt, because that's how we create from that, you know? It's literally, we choose what is familiar, which is to say what is family. So oftentimes it's like you have to sort out what was going on in your family of origin, or you're going to recreate it in your current relationship. So there's usually some awareness that needs, some waking up that needs to happen. And
you are the poster child of that. And I don't want to spoil it because you do cover it in your TED Talk and in your book. But yes, I feel like you are the poster child of someone who addressed the childhood and the upbringing. It's such a huge part of your messaging, really. Yeah,
it is. Because I think everybody doesn't have to have as dramatic of a childhood as I had to be recreating stuff in their childhood, you know, from their childhood dynamics. It's basically every problem people have in their relationship is generally going to be coming from some problem or unresolved thing that was happening in their history. That's just how it is.
And I think
how human beings are wired.
really good relationships, I feel like you are children. You're the good parts of childhood together.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. We often joke that what we saw in our relationship and what we found in each other was the ability to feel like children every day.
Wow. Well, you guys sound like you have secure functioning. I'm just going to say. So here's the other thing I would say that people, it's not the biggest mistake people make, but it's the biggest thing that they really don't understand, which is that we think relationships are just sort of like made up as we go along, and that everybody's sort of working it out, and they're listening to their grandma, their mom, or their best friend. They're getting advice, they're reading stuff, they're scrolling Instagram. The thing is, there's tons of relationship science out there now, especially in the last 5 to 7 years. And there are very clear scientific principles that have been, studied and quantified about what makes a relationship work and what makes a relationship not work. And people don't understand, it's not random. Like, relationships work when you do certain things, and they don't work when you do certain things or don't do certain things. It's just that simple. So if you do the certain things, you will have a relationship that functions. It's like a car working,
Yes.
Now, you may not be like, whatever the passion piece or the in love piece or whatever the specific details of the relationship are. Let's say you find that person. There's very specific things you do that make it work. And if you don't do those things, it will be rocky. And so when I see people who have secure functioning, like you guys have, and I can just feel it and tell, because just what you're saying is all what people who are insecure functioning say. You know that you're doing those things. Now, some people grew up in those houses, so they naturally do those things. It's almost like a language. It's like an emotional language. They naturally speak that language. Other people grew up in other kinds of households, and they don't naturally speak the language, and they have to learn the language. And if they knew that, they could just start learning the language, and then their relationships would immediately improve. But people think it's more like magic than that, and they don't get, there's actually science to it.
Oh, that's so well put. That reminds me of a line in the book when you say, like, people think it's magic. It's just this thing you find. You said in the book at one point that it's like people sort of associate chemistry and feelings as these things that happen to them.
Right.
And I think this was in the chapter about being shallow, which, by the way, was one of my favorites because I saw a few too many girlfriends in that chapter. But it's the sense that you are not in control of the feelings you are feeling. It's just all just happening to you. You're just like receiving, which is not what it is at all, really.
No.
Yeah.
Like, you are an active player in feeling.
That's right. Yeah. Yes. Especially once that beginning stage wears, it doesn't have to wear off, but once that beginning stage sort of gives way to the next stage, that's when it really becomes a lot of choices. How are you going to respond to the things that happen in the relationship? And if you respond from a place of like defensiveness or a place of avoidance or a place of anxiety, you're going to create something that's wobbly and has, there's very clear things that lead to breakups, and it's not random at all. It's not even a little bit random.
Okay, so on that note, we're already going to go out of order then, but based on what you just said, because this is such a common question. A lot of the questions I'm going to have for you are themes we've seen. We've had this podcast for almost a year now, and we have 2 out of 4 of our episodes a month are us giving relationship advice. So either with a live caller or we're in the living room answering questions that we read. And it's insane what patterns there are in the questions. They're often variations on the same theme.
Yes.
And so based on what you just said, like the sequence of events.
Yeah.
A very common question we get is a girl has gone on a great first date. Great first date, magical. She thinks it's something special. She doesn't know what to do. What do you do next? What would you tell her to do? Does she text first? Does she wait for him? What do you say?
I would say you would do nothing at first.
Yay!
I think you want to see. I don't think people give enough. They don't trust enough in the early stages, I have a lot of people who come to me for relationship advice, friends of friends. And I often see them if they're on the anxious side. So again, this goes to the attachment thing. So if you're anxious, you're going to want to do something because you're going to want that feedback so that you know that they like you and you know where you stand. It's very, very hard to deal with uncertainty if you're on the anxious side of the color wheel, right? But you need to work on dealing with uncertainty because the truth is that uncertainty is always actually going to be there. So you're going to deal with it on day one. You're going to deal with it throughout your relationship because we don't know what's going to happen ever, you know? And that's just part of life. So I would say do nothing. I would say see what the person does. What is their level or their rhythms of getting in touch with you? You know, this is something you want to know because you want to know if what comes naturally to them is something that you feel good with. Not like, can you tolerate that? Can you hang with that? Does that feel good to you too? You don't want to make something happen. You want to see what they're doing and you want to do who you are, you know? You know, a lot of times people will say to me, women in particular, will say to me, how come he gets to make all the decisions? Like, how come I'm always waiting for him to do everything? And it's really not him. So there's a principle in relationships that whoever wants something less controls it. Okay. So that's whether it's sex, money, you name it. Whoever wants a relationship or some aspect of a relationship less.
So true.
Yeah.
I'm laughing as I start like going through the Rolodex of all the different aspects. It's amazing how true that is.
Oh yeah.
Yes. So
science.
You can't fake somebody out that you want the thing less than they do, but you just have to you have to understand that if they want it less than you do, you're going to be seeing where they are. That's your only real choice. You can't force someone to get in a relationship with you.
Right.
You can't talk them into it. You can't fuck somebody into a relationship with you. You can have sex with them, but that doesn't mean they're going to get in a relationship with you. And this is why oftentimes I say that the biggest mistake people make is friends with benefits or any version of thinking that if I try to fast track the relationship by getting sexually involved, maybe I can get them hooked and then they'll be so into it that they will just see how great I am and have a relationship with me. Well, that's not how it works for most people who aren't on the anxious side of things or who don't have specific hormones that women have in very high amounts. Men have them in much less high amounts. That they don't necessarily bond because they're having sex with you.
This is an interesting point you bring up in your book, and I think it's a sensitive topic.
Yes.
Yeah.
It discusses that men and women are different. I know that's crazy.
I know.
But women have the oxytocin response.
There's more of it. Yeah. Men have
orgasm.
vasopressin, but it's not the same thing as oxytocin.
Right.
Know?
Just to be clear, you're not saying that it's wrong for women to sleep around if they want to.
No, I don't care. Do whatever you want. Yeah.
Exactly. But what you're saying is if you want to get into a serious committed relationship, sleeping around is for on one hand is bad because what it does is it creates artificial connections chemically with men who you shouldn't.
I mean, they're
with.
actual connections. Ask any woman who's bonded. You know, I joke in the book, like, your body doesn't know if you're having sex with Charlie Sheen. It's gonna bond. You know what I'm saying? If there's like high quality orgasms and you're gonna be like bonding because the body's just gonna do that. And you can figure out who it is later. That's how the species evolved. We have two prerogatives as a species: survival and reproduction, right? And we survive so that we can reproduce. Actually, living into old age is not one of the species' objectives. It really doesn't give a fuck. After it only wants you to bond, you know, pair bond, mate, have a baby, and then as many as you can, and then you can drop dead as far as the species is concerned.
So true. Yes.
So it's like knowing that, and I know that people don't like evolutionary biology because it's super inconvenient, but I feel like this is where liberal people tend to be sort of like climate change deniers. Like we become science deniers in this area because we don't like what it means. It means these things that are really bothersome. But the fact of the matter is that the whole species is designed to, I mean, just because someone invented the pill in 1964, right, does not mean that our DNA has caught up to this new state of affairs where you can have sex with whoever you want and have no consequences. You know, my body still bonds to anyone that I'm having even low quality sex, but like high quality sex with. And once I figured that out, I stopped having sex with people I didn't want to bond to. So it was just so basic. And then my life got way more orderly. I spent a lot less time on the phone with my girlfriends because I wasn't torturing myself, literally like impaling myself on some guy who may or may not be interested. Who may or may not be interested in having a relationship with me. I needed to find that out first, since I know me. Now, not everybody's like me. There are women on the avoidance side of the attachment spectrum who can have a one-night stand, and it's no big deal. I wished that was me. I was like, when I was in my 20s, I was like, how come I can't be like that? Well, that's just not how I am. And so once I accepted that, I got to align myself. This is what I mean by the alignment. Align myself with who I am and what's right for me. And I wasn't so susceptible to what was going on in the culture or what my girlfriends were saying. I just could do what was right for me. And I could say that on a date in the beginning stages of a relationship. And I didn't feel ashamed or embarrassed. And I didn't fib or say, sure, I'll do friends with benefits. I didn't have to lie to the guy. I could just say, here's the deal. If I have sex with you, I will bond with you. And I don't know if you want to be bonded to. And that would be a good thing to find out before going to that place. And that is what's called a boundary, basically. And I've never found one man who said, oh, sure, and then did not have at least that baseline intention toward exploring a meaningful relationship with me after me saying that. I've had men leave and go, okay, forget it, bye. But I've never had one go blow past that and not have real intentions toward me and move forward.
Oh, so good.
It's so interesting. And just a question. If you feel like an extraordinary bond on a first date.
Yeah.
Is it okay to impale yourself? By the way, I will be using that many times.
You are?
And I'll give you credit once in a while.
That's cool. Well, I would have the conversation, you know. Mm-hmm. I would say, personally, I wouldn't.
Okay.
I personally wouldn't, because was there harm in waiting? There's no harm. Let's just see how I feel in the morning.
Right.
Let's just be a person who's not impulsive.
I think it also matters too what that person's track record is as well. Like if they have a tendency to sleep with a guy early, and just for the record, we never have any issue with anyone sleeping on the first date or whatever. They can do it. They can do whatever they want. But it really does come back to the goal, which is if your goal is to have this long-term committed relationship. And I feel like it's difficult to answer your question without sort of looking at the track record, because if you have a history of sleeping with someone on the first, second, or third dates and then
not working out,
a month or two later, you're like, what happened? You didn't set that boundary, and maybe you weren't in touch enough with yourself.
I agree. Right. It's a more nuanced, complicated decision.
Yeah, you just have to take care of yourself. You know, I mean, I remember feeling. I've had so many conversations about this. I remember one time having a great, amazing first date, and the person was like, "Don't you think we should just figure that out later? You know, like we'll just figure it out later." And I was like, you know, that's not how I do it. I get that, yes. And then maybe like some matter of days later, many dates later, I would say like probably 4 or 5 dates later, there was a little, now we know each other better. There's a little deeper conversation about it. I'm like, but here's the thing about figuring it out later. Like, I just want to say, where are all those people you figured it out later with? Like, where are they right now? They are not here. So I just I'm not volunteering for that in my own life, because I just know I don't need the wear and tear emotionally. I'm trying to protect. I don't watch horror movies either. Do you know what I mean? I don't want to see too much violence either. I like to take care of myself and keep myself from having to deal with too much emotional input. I don't know. It's about care. It's about self-care,
Yeah. And being honest with yourself about what that looks like, because, and I love this also in the book. I mean, I'm really obsessed with your book, if you can't tell. And I really don't gush like this over everyone's books.
It's true. This is true.
But the term, it could come off bad to be like, this is why you're not married.
Right.
And I think a lot of people, often women, lie to themselves about the fact that that's what they want, as though it's non-feminist to want to get married.
Totally.
But I do think a huge part of ultimately protecting yourself is, and again, another chapter in the book, is to not lie to yourself about that. Totally. It's totally okay to want to get married and to have that relationship.
Exactly. And I was taught, I'm older than you, I was taught that was completely unfeminist, and you shouldn't even want that, that a woman needs a woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle. And that is actually just not true. As far as the species is concerned, we need partners. We do. It doesn't matter who your partner is. I don't care. But I don't want to partner with a dog. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I want to, or a kid. I want to partner with a mutually loving mate. That is a huge part of being human. So
Amen.
I just look at that and I embrace it. And I just try not to judge any part of it. I don't want to make it sound like this is about having sex on a first date, because it isn't. It's about what is right for you. And if you can have that relationship and it doesn't cost you anything, I'm like, go for it.
Go for it. Yeah.
Yeah. But I just know for me, it did cost me something. And many of my girlfriends, they'd be like, I'm not successfully doing friends with benefits. I'm falling in love with these guys, basically, So that to me is a thing that if we're going to talk about modern relationships, we have to talk about that. How do you deal with the fact that we all have so much choice, but sometimes it's not in my own best interest to go too fast.
But that brings me to a huge question that I had reading your book, because again, your book was written in 2012.
Yeah.
And it's safe to say, well, I will mention that in 2012, I was on dating apps in 2012. So were you, Andy. And I think there was, it was sort of coming into the world as a normal thing, but there was still some stigma around it in 2012.
Oh,
a little bit.
Yeah.
Not it wasn't shocking.
I know when I started in 2005 or 6 on MySpace, by the way, I'm a first mover, early adopter.
Amazing.
I was a creep. I was like, I'm meeting all these girls on MySpace. They're like, ew. I was like, no, well, what's wrong with that? Why is that ew if we're actually talking and having connections? I didn't understand. But anyway,
yeah,
it was really considered creepy then.
I remember dating a guy briefly in 2011 or so. And when we met his friends, we had met on Match, and he told me to tell his friends that we had met on the subway or something. He was embarrassed.
That's funny.
So there was still some stigma. And so my point is, your book's from 2012. It's now 9 years later in a world where people are drowning in options. Just when you talk about options, that's what I was thinking of. And what I think is interesting with that is it then starts to tie in what you touch on in the book, and generally your overall messaging, which is sort of valuing yourself and letting the game come to you, is one of my favorite lines you use. Yeah. Another one you say is, you do not need to make it easy for a man to date you.
True.
So we're in 2021. When men don't need a ton of game, they don't need to be big risk takers. Andy talked me up at a event, which I think is a testament to your generation.
Yes.
But I think your son now, Tracy, is probably in his early 20s.
24, yeah.
So
no game. He's got no game, I guarantee you.
He's her son. He's got to have game.
I'm sorry. Oh, that's true, actually. That's
true. He will have a game someday. The pieces are there, but they're not in any sort of order.
I guess my question is, how do you balance what you talk about in the book, which is the feminine energy, which is allowing a man to come to you, not necessarily making that first move, with the fact that men are almost, I would say at this point, groomed to not have to take a risk and even
it's pretty fascinating. Yeah, it's a great question.
Oh, yeah.
Because what you guys, I don't know. Let's just start by saying, I don't know. I will say the relationship I'm in now, I took risks I've never taken before. And I'm going to say, in part, it's coming from that place that what you're speaking on right now is interesting. But I also think, I haven't worked this out because a lot of what I do as a relationship coach is figure out my own shit and then help you with what I just barely figured out or what I'm currently figuring out. And I'm always learning in my relationship. So I think the feminine energy is obviously super duper important. And I don't pursue. Now, here's the thing. I don't pursue inside of the relationship either. One of the most toxic relationship dynamics is the pursuer-distancer dynamic. That's where one person is like, there's two versions. There's there's many versions, but there's the version of like, talk to me. We need to, like if there's a problem in the relationship, one person pursues the other person and says, we must talk about it. And then the other person's like, I don't want to talk about it. Now, this kind of maps onto the male-female thing, but not always. Another version of it, and the more one person pursues, the more the other person distances. This is like the hamburgers and French fries of relationship, of divorces. This is why people break up, because you've got one person who's heavily pursuing and another person who's distancing. Well, there's a version of that happens. That pursuing behavior starts even before you're in the relationship. It starts when you think you have to pursue in order to get the relationship, right? So I never pursue. I just know there's something toxic. I'm going to say that's a strong word, but there's something that easily brings a relationship out of kilter about pursuing. You sort of have to be more, and this is probably a spiritual idea, more like contained in your spot. So, I want to bring together a lot of different concepts. So a secure person who has a secure attachment style. In the adult version, it's called free and autonomous. So what I'm saying that we need to cultivate is a sense of freedom and autonomy in what we're doing, as opposed to going after somebody because I'm coming from a place of lack and I want to get this person and put it on lockdown. Right? So I think as long as you're coming from a place of autonomy and freedom, you can do certain things that maybe look like you are signaling your availability. Because I think a lot of men need to know that the answer will be yes.
Yes, I could not agree more with the point that you've just made, by the way. I really feel like in this world of online dating and all the options just at your fingertips, why would a guy even approach a girl at a coffee shop when he has 100 at the tip of his thumb who he knows are single and looking? It's like they've completely lost that chip that makes them take a risk.
Yeah, I think it's actually, this is a bigger, I've spoken with you about this. I know sometimes you think I'm crazy, but I think online dating is more dangerous to the human race than climate change right now.
That's interesting.
Because I think the evolution of, how men and women reproduce has been the same for literally millions of years.
Yeah.
And now suddenly it's been literally turned upside down, the dynamics.
Yeah.
And I think what we're going to see a lot more of is, first of all, men who are kind of neutered in their ability to pursue women, and women who just give up. They're like, forget this. I'm not playing this game, but this is not the way my DNA has taught me how this is supposed to work. And I'm just going to get out of the market. So you're going to have, I think, and I know this is really taking it to the next level, and this is really not what we're discussing, but I think honestly, you might see reproduction rates plummet.
They're definitely going down. There's no question about that. across the world, people are not having, at least in the Western world.
Yeah.
And, the marriage rate is like below 50%. The marriage rate has never been lower. People don't get married,
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And obviously there are some, there's so much anecdotal stuff about this. Like in places like Japan, like young people don't have relationships anymore.
There's more relationships often with dolls, with actual dolls.
And even in the United States, a lot of people don't have relationships anymore. Young people are not, they don't pursue relationships the way we did in my generation. So I think you're right. And this thing, the online thing is very interesting because it does sort of interrupt. There's a flow that gets interrupted. And it's hard for me to speak to that like in a really thoughtful way because I haven't thought about it that much. But I do think that, yes, you have to let the game come to you. Now, here's what I learned about myself. What I used to do is stand on the 2-yard line and then see who ran 98 yards to get me. Okay. What I needed to be doing, now this was part of why my relationships weren't working out, because the only people who were going to run 98 yards really kind of had some self-esteem issues. A healthy person, a securely attached person is going to go 50 yards and go, are you coming up here? Or, oh no, okay. They want mutuality. Do you know what I mean? Like, and then I also had this thing where I wanted people to commit to being in a relationship with me right off the bat, like in the first, like right off the bat. And a secure functioning person isn't going to do that. And so I had to really, at the end of my 6-year relationship, really look at, now, how did I create this? And I could see that certain of my ideas I had taken too far, right? Yeah. And I do want the game to come to me, but also I do have to also go to the game. That was a learning that I needed to do, to say, like, how have I changed since 2012? How has the world changed? That's one thing, but how have I changed? To me, it's like, this is the difference between just like a person out here figuring their shit out and writing books at the same time and like a guru. Is a guru doesn't ever look at their own, how they need to change. They just keep doing their guru thing. I don't want to be that person. The world does not need any more of those people in it. Not that, not saying they're not children of God, just saying we don't need any more narcissistic people who don't want to look at their own thing or be wrong ever. I had to go, oh, that thing, I went too far with it out of my childhood wound that said, I cannot risk rejection. So I'm just only going to deal with people who've told me on day 3, I won't be rejected.
Right.
And I had to come to, if I'm going to be more functioning as a secure person, I'm going to need to take more risk. So that meant I had to kind of go more to the 50-yard line. I had to state more. It wasn't just like state, I want you, although that was part of it. It was more about stating my life project. No. Like, here's me, here's where I am in my life, here's what I'm looking for in my life. Doesn't have to be you. I'm not focused on, you are not the solution to my problem. I don't have a problem. I'm more just saying, here's what I'm ready for in my life. And then I'm sharing that with you, as opposed to, I would sort of maybe in the past hold back some of those details. And none of that even gets talked about because I'm standing on the 2-yard line waiting to see if you come all the way down here to get me. And my main qualification, or a big qualification, was whoever, I wouldn't even consider candidates who weren't coming all the way down there. So that was one of the things I had to learn between 2012 and now to create a different kind of relationship.
That was a good analogy, first of all. We love analogies here at Dear Shandy.
Me too.
And what you're touching on, it actually is very validating for me, because it reminds me of what I've often, when people have asked me these early stages, what do you do? What's that fine line between pursuing and being pursued? And I agree. It's not like you can be so waiting for the game to come to you that you just don't show up to the game at all. Right. I've always thought that it's sort of more like you show up, you make a 50-50 effort to meet for the first time, in my case, and then that is the bait. Just like you're saying, you state who you are, what you're about. You're not looking to have your problems fixed, but it's like, this is who I am. Now you've met me, you see what I look like, you see what we're like when we talk to each other. And then that's when I go to that 2-yard line.
Yeah. Well, it's...
that's when it's like, based on what you've learned, you can either be interested in what I have to offer or not. And in my experience, I mean, I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but I do think that that's something that I've always had kind of naturally, and it works in my opinion.
This was the thing about you on The Bachelor, right? Is that when I saw you, you had a rare quality in the world of The Bachelor, which was you did have a sense of self. So much of what I was doing live tweeting The Bachelor is like, okay, this is what not to do. It's just like a long ass thing about this is what not to do when you're dating. It's like, there's so much like shape shifting and conforming on there. And you had a self, with an outline, and you were contained within that self. So yeah, I would say you've been embodying that. Well, at least since I became aware of you.
That's so sweet. Thank you.
Yes. So, and it's a pretty rare thing in popular culture. Honestly, we don't see a lot of it. We either see avoidant women who are like, I don't care. I'll fuck the pizza guy. I don't even care. Like, whatever. Who cares? Meaning they don't need men. And they, most female protagonists on TV are avoidants, I'm like, I never recognize these people. I'm like, who are these people? Like, what was the show I was just watching where it's like, oh, here we go again, where the funny, the cut to, you're just having sex with some random person. I'm like, I'm not capable of doing that. And every woman on TV seems able to do it. I'm like, why is this?
There was a scene from Hacks.
Oh, Hacks. That was the last one. Yeah,
where she has sex with the Uber guy.
Oh, no, from
Fleabag. They all do it. It's like Nurse Jackie, you name it. They're all... they're all avoidance. And I'm like, I don't recognize these people. I don't identify with that behavior. I'm not dissing it. I'm just saying that's not my experience. My experience is if it were me, I'd have sex with the Uber guy and then go, does he like me? Okay.
And yes, the answer is yes, he does.
And I'd be like, always. I'm all bonded to him now. You know what I mean? So I'm like, how come nobody like that's on TV? So I think like, there is a fine line there, but this is why I hesitate to get into prescriptives. What I would say is when you're aligned with what is highest in you, you're going to attract somebody where there's going to be a natural unfolding. You're going to take some risks sometimes. They're going to take some risk, but the mutuality is going to be there. And it's going to go, there's going to be, the word I use is grace. There will be grace in the unfolding of the relationship. That's what you're looking for. You're not looking for, well, we played chess and I did this and it was rook to 7 or however people talk about chess. It's not like that. It's like it needs a certain amount of grace, ordained, something that is coming from a place that is past strategy or past a rule or past anything like that. You want to recognize another person's heart. I grant you that doesn't happen very often, but that is what you're looking for. So if that's not happening, you can kind of go, okay, namaste, moving on. No, sometimes we don't want to be alone or we want to have sex or we want to hang out or we want to have dinner or we want to do whatever. So we keep seeing somebody that we already know we don't want to be in a long-term committed relationship with. Or we already know we don't want to be in a lifetime or that. I've done plenty of that. I've been in full-on years-long relationships with people that I knew, I'm not going to marry this person because I don't want to, Now, I didn't lie to that person. I said, I don't see that. Now, maybe it could change. Here's what I've learned. That doesn't change. That is what I've learned. It's like a relationship is what it is from the very beginning. This is like my lesson most recently in the past couple years is like, there's a DNA. It is what it is. If it's more friendship, that's what it is. You don't really take it over to this other place. Doesn't mean you don't have sex with the person, but it's never going to be that. It's going to be what it is. Or if it's more sexual and there's no friendship, then it's going to be that. Or if there's not quite enough of whatever it is, then it's going to be that. Going to therapy, doing all these things, it doesn't change. It is what it is, right? It's like a person or a baby. That baby's going to turn into a bigger version of that baby, but it's never going to turn into a different baby, And once I got this, I could let go of relationships that weren't what I was looking for way, way, way earlier in the process.
Well, people are so fearful. They're driven by the fear of loneliness. It's an incredibly horrible, it's probably the number one fear.
It's definitely
being
up there.
alone.
And it's a real thing. So I don't want to minimize it. It's a real thing.
Oh, absolutely. I'm not minimizing. I think it's a terrible fear.
No, I don't think you are. I just want to acknowledge that.
But I think that the driver of staying in these relationships is the fear of loneliness. And I think confronting that fear is a very important thing, because what that fear will do is just get you deeper into a situation that's harder to extricate from.
Yeah.
And it will cause bigger problems than loneliness in your life. So confronting the fear of loneliness, I think, is very important. Not saying confronting the fear like I'm accepting I'm going to be lonely for the rest of my life, but I'm accepting that I'm going to be maybe lonely for the next couple of months. Yeah. That's it.
Well, I think that there's another thing I've noticed too, and I don't know if this is true for everybody, but just like you can't snap your fingers and call a relationship into your life. I also am wondering if you can't snap your fingers and call it out. Like my thing is like, I will know a relationship needs to end before I'm able to end it. The day that the relationship ends is almost just as magical as the day it starts. Like you will know it needs to happen, but I have not found that I can like go, all right, it's over starting today, and pull the plug and that's it. I found that I need to be there until it's done. It's like an assignment, or you're on a bus ride and you're there. And I'm not talking about abusive relationships, you guys. I'm talking about regular old relationships that this is over. I'm not going to belong here anymore. But I have not been able, like that day, I fucking handle it. It's like, it's more like there's an assignment and I complete the assignment. And that day, it's like a leaf falling off the tree. It's over. And then you're like, wow, why was it so easy that day when for the previous 4 months or however long it takes you to get out of a relationship? Well, I'm going to say because there's still stuff you're learning there, and it can look like I'm afraid to be alone, but really it's that I haven't finished the assignment yet. I don't know.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I don't know. I say this because I've had to become a lot less, what's the word? Certain about stuff. The older I get, the more I really realize, like, we don't really call every shot in our lives. It's not like that. We're in a dance with life. Sometimes we do our will, and our will works. And then other times life's doing its thing on me and we're interacting with it. Right. And, but when I'm ready and I'm coming and I'm like, okay, I'm really ready to have a new experience. Because a lot of times a relationship is showing you something that you really need to come to terms with. And it doesn't end until you come to terms with it. And then, boom, it's like the spell breaks and you move on. But I don't know if you can just click your heels 3 times and have it happen. Otherwise, wouldn't everybody just leave those bad relationships? How come they're not? I'm looking for a more gentler way to interact with that particular feature of being a human being, having relationships.
Yeah. I mean, the one who's able to just stop a relationship the second they're like, oh, I think this is going to end one day, I'm stopping it right now. That's like they're on another level.
Yeah,
That's
doesn't
like master level. I don't know if anyone like that exists. That might be that actually might be sociopathic behavior.
That's what I'm saying.
Efficient, but sociopathic.
Yeah, I was thinking that's not someone you want to be in a relationship with.
Yeah, I'm not sure. So what do you do in that meantime? There's those mean times. And I try to have I want to have more and more gentleness in the way I look at these human experiences, because we're all out here doing the best we can. I think a big piece of having a good relationship is knowing that no one's ever holding out on you. If they're not giving it to you, it's because they don't have it to give. Right. And that is both freeing and, really sobering,
Okay. You said something a little earlier that sparked this other question I have, and this is a frequent question we get again, which is you were talking about trying to change a person and just accepting that the relationship is what it's going to be, or it's going to be what it is.
Yeah.
A common one we get is about love languages. Like if your love language is X and your partner's is Y, it's sort of tough to know whether or not that is deal breaker territory, if that's your main issue. Is that a matter of communication, would you say? Or do you think that's just, you're not going to change the person?
Well, this is where I go to science. Like love languages to me are cool and fun, but it's like astrology. It's like, you know what I mean? It's like
Andy's very excited about your answer.
Yeah.
We just had an astrologer on, by the way.
And I love astrology. Don't get me wrong. I'm going to get all in your charts and I'm going to do everybody's
not again.
I'm very into it, but I'm into the science. So love languages is more like, it's like a party game to me. A science would say making a relationship work is about stating needs. It's about negotiating win-wins. It's about attunement. It's about these very concrete actions that you are taking when you're in a conflict discussion, things that you're doing, other things you're not doing. For example, eye rolling, okay? Eye rolling is highly correlated with divorce because of contempt. And there's 4 things people do: defensiveness, stonewalling, contempt,
the 4
and
the 4 horsemen.
Forget the other thing. It'll come back to me.
Yeah.
So these 4 things are scientifically shown to create deal breaker, right? I don't think love languages are scientifically deal breakers. I'm interested in the science because if I know that when my partner makes up what's called a bid and says, while they're reading the paper, and that means I need to, the couples who succeed turn toward their partner 80% of the time they make a bid, and the couples who fail turn toward their partner 30% of the time they make a bid. I want to be in the 80%. I know I need to turn toward my partner, period.
Wow.
So this is the shit that is the really boots on the ground stuff that has to do with whether people are happy in their relationships. And there's a number of these metrics and there's new studies being done all the time, but a number of these metrics and things that people are coming up with protocols based on this research that allow people to interact in ways that are way more functional. Here would be an example. So a lot of times when you're in a relationship with somebody with a different love language, let's say, what that feels like to you is that you're not being seen and heard, right? So a lot of times what people are going to do is that they're going to go to the partner and start talking about the attachment system. I'm not feeling seen and heard, okay? And then what that does to the other person is they shut down because they're like, oh my God, they're pursuing me. They're kind of trying to enmesh me. You know, I'm feeling engulfed and I need distance. I need space. And so this is not conscious. This is just a dynamic that gets created. So instead of going to the attachment system, what you can do is you go to a collaboration. Because if somebody's the difference between collaboration is, hey, want to help me rake the yard? That's how you get your need for connection met. That's science, right? Love languages is like, I'm a Virgo. You know?
Are you a Virgo?
Yes.
Same.
Okay. Oh, that makes all the sense.
It does make a lot of sense. It totally does.
We have like heavy Virgo energy going on. Yeah.
Okay, Tracy, I have...
Wait, what are you, Andy?
Scorpio.
Sorry. Oh, that's a good match, though. That's
of course you're going to say that.
No. If it wasn't, I would say so. But the water signs and the earth signs get along.
No one likes Scorpios. We're like the Florida of horoscopes.
You guys don't need to be liked, though. That's what's
true.
Great about you.
You're
That's
right.
true. Oh,
right.
You know.
Nice.
Wise.
Okay, Tracy, I have one more quick question that I'm pretty sure I know the answer you're going to give. And then I'm going to give you a really quick true or false. So the question first is, and I think you are qualified to say this because in your book, you talked about how you have a radar for men who are willing to commit. And so the question is, how do you know a man is serious and ready to get married?
Well, you know, I want to say they'll tell you.
That's what I thought you'd
the
say.
answer. You win, dear Shandy.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like here's what they'll for sure tell you if they're not there.
Yeah.
Yes.
If they're not there.
Yes. Oh, that's so satisfying.
Mm-hmm.
Because in a way, it doesn't matter if they're there because they don't need to be there today, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But men who are not there, and now I have girlfriends who are like, that's bullshit. I got a million men tell me they didn't want to be in a relationship and I ended up in a relationship with them. And I just want to go, where are they now? Okay. Because like maybe you got in a temporary relationship with them. And I mean, even temporary of 10 years, but I'm not looking for a temporary I really don't need any more turnover in my life. I really don't. I think a person gets to that place where you just want to build something and you don't need to like tear it down and move on, you know? Mm-hmm. And I think you can tell if a man is there or a woman.
Yeah. I mean, in my experience, that he'll tell you is entirely true.
Well, I was just going to say, I think when you talk about what it is that you want in your life, if what you're saying that you're looking for is, you know, I'm looking for, it doesn't have to be the word marriage because that scares people, but I'm looking for like to build a life with someone, or I'm looking to build a home with someone, or you say those words. And if they don't want that, they'll go away. You know?
Yeah.
They'll go away.
And it always ties back to a chapter in the book. And if you don't feel comfortable saying that because you think they'll go away, then there's a problem. You're lying. To both that person and yourself, really. I
mean, the thing is if you think they'll go away and then you say it and then they go away and then you're like, okay, but then you learn that's a good thing because you don't really want anybody here who isn't doing, you know, who isn't wanting what you want. That's just so important.
She gives the most satisfying answers.
It's like we're just with each other.
I know.
Yeah.
Like a third of us.
I know.
Yeah.
I have one quick question before we get to the true and false. It's not a quick question, but you have to answer it quickly because we don't want to take too much of your time. You wrote this book in 2012.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Based on the hypersensitive, woke, whatever you want to call it, atmosphere today, do you think you could have published this book?
No, I think I would have been canceled for and I've said that recently. I'm like, if I wrote that today, I would be canceled.
What do you feel about that?
I feel like, so again, everything for me is like a relationship metaphor. And if you're in a relationship with somebody, you can't cancel them. You have to turn toward them, you know? So the whole notion of that things are so conditional is not secure. No one is going to feel secure in that. You're not going to get, which is to say, so the reason security is so important and secure functioning is so important because it comes from the parent-child relationship. Secure children can explore the world. You grow that up. Secure people in relationships can give service to the world. They can go out into the world and release their gifts into the world in a way that people who are constantly checking to see if their relationship is still there cannot do that. That's like the main reason to get into a secure relationship so that you can go do other things besides think about trying to get in a relationship all the time. Because the thing is most people who are not in a relationship are trying to figure out how to get in one. We all need connection. We all need sex and love and touch. This is just central to the experience of being human. So when on a societal level or one-on-one level, people are constantly afraid that they're going to be canceled, which is to say rejected or marginalized, that's not good for anybody. We need to have a sense that it's okay. Just like a parent and child, it's okay. You can make mistakes. It's fine. I'm still going to love you. Or your partner, it's okay. You don't have to be perfect. You can be X, Y, or Z certain way, and I'm still going to love you because it's okay because everyone has flaws and it's like messy and it's fine.
Yep. Well, I'm glad you got this book out under the wire, so to speak.
I know.
Because it's it's so important.
Yeah.
And it's almost elevated above the self-help section, which I'm sure is where it is in the bookstore. But this is in its own category.
Yeah.
It's just such a
Thank you.
You're so on point, and it's so raw, the advice, and accurate that I think everyone needs to read this. People, even in happy relationships, should read this just to check in.
As someone who's in a happy relationship, it was just the most validating thing to read because it put into words what I have felt about other people's relationships.
Yeah.
And you just articulate it so accurately that it was just like the most satisfying read ever.
It was.
I think that's why it went viral, actually, because I was saying things that people feel but have never quite been able to articulate,
Yes. Yeah. And we're probably scared to even try.
That's true too.
Honestly.
Yeah.
And now they are all scared to say.
Yeah, everyone's scared.
Yay, everyone.
Well, that's going to shift. I'm sure that will shift because everything shifts,
Hope you're right.
Okay, Tracy, a quick true or false, and then we'll set you free.
Okay.
True or false, when you know, you know.
I'm going to say true.
True or false, timing is everything.
True-ish. Because I think timing is always moving, so you never know.
Final one, opposites attract.
I'm going to say, yeah, that's true. You want to know what's truer? That similarity isn't necessarily, similarity is more nuanced than we think. It's not like you like purple, I like purple too. It's more structural than that. So I think opposites can definitely attract. I mean, there's no question about that opposites attract, but you need similarity too.
Yeah.
Now, when you say this wasn't true or false, so technically it should not be a discussion, but do you think opposites attract immediately, or do you think opposites can attract for the long term?
I think sometimes people look opposite on the surface and turn out to have a lot of similarity underneath.
So you really
either
are saying,
in their belief system or in their approach to life or in their ways of being.
Okay, so opposites attract short term, but not necessarily long term. But you may find out that you thought you were opposite, but you're actually the same long term.
That's right. That you're complementary. And I would also say, I know, because true and false is hard for me because binaries are really tough for me. Any binary, I just reject most all of them. I'd be like, no, it's more nuanced,
Yeah, it's never true or false. It's always gray.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's both,
Yeah.
It's both.
Tracy, what a pleasure and an honor.
You guys, it was
delight.
great talking to you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
I don't know if you are working on another book, but I hope you are so that we can have you back and so I can
one
read
of these
more
days.
of your writing.
Well, I'll come back anytime. And when I'm in New York, we can go have coffee or whatever.
Oh my
excellent.
God, I'm so
We'll
excited.
hang out. Yay.
Tracy, thank you so much and you have a great day.
Thank you. You too.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Oh, that's good stuff. It's good.
She was wonderful.
She lived up to expectations.
Yeah.
And they were very high.
They were very high.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I pumped her up a lot to you.
Well, you did. I mean, I also read excerpts, a lot of this book.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. And, sometimes we talked about this, we both have had this experience where you meet someone online or something and you never speak to them on the phone. You have all these amazing text conversations and you meet them and they're catatonic. And I was thinking is she what's she going to be like in person? Is it all going to not translate in person?
Yeah.
And she was she is who she is in the book. She's fantastic.
Yeah. It's difficult to toe that line between being a straight shooter, but also being gentle. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
It's actually incredible. Like in this book, there's so many lines in this book or titles to chapters in this book that, when she talks about how she would be canceled, I think there's a lot of lines in this book that would get flack or people would choose to be offended by at the get-go. But actually, if you read what she's saying, not only is she right about the message that she's saying, it's just got, kind of a clickbaity title, like you're a slut, and you're like, oh, how dare you? And then you read it and you're like, oh, actually, there's a lot of reasoning behind this. But she also brings in this nurturing touch. I gotta say, I have a real appreciation for good writing. I'm a writing snob, as we all know by now, and her writing just does it for me. It's so conversational, but also impeccable at the same
it's
time.
medical quality.
Yeah.
It's pharmaceutical grade relationship advice. It's like, I compare, here's an analogy.
Okay.
Honest love advice.
Yeah.
It's like heart surgery.
Yeah.
It's really messy and disgusting. And if you're not under anesthesia, the most horrific pain you'd ever experience in your life. But in the end, it saves your life. And that's what I think it is. You can't do heart surgery by just stroking someone's chest. You're like, oh, it's nice. Your heart will be fine.
Yeah.
Those clots will unclog just by me being gentle. No, you have to cut them open. You have to cut open the arteries. You have to tear the heart and sew it back up. And that's what she does.
You're right. There's surgical precision to the advice she gives. And I can see for a lot of people, it might be very, very uncomfortable to read some of these chapters.
And offensive.
Yeah, because you're like, how dare you say that I can't have sex on the first date? Which, by the way, is not remotely what she's saying. But I can see a lot of people taking it that way. As she said,
everything is nuanced.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm such a big fan. And she lived up to the high expectations. And I know whenever we have authors on, like we tell them to read the book, but I'm not kidding when I say especially if you are looking for a relationship and you're having a hard time finding that. Yeah. And if you don't want to get married, then that's also cool. But if that is what you're looking for, the first step is admitting that to yourself. It's okay. And I'm not just saying this. It's a must read. It is.
The only reason I would hesitate recommending people read that is I think it will cannibalize Dear Shandy.
That occurred to me.
Yeah,
I'm like, oh no.
Don't read too much of this. Just skim it.
It's epic advice. And, I actually didn't read this book before I went on The Bachelor, before I met you. Mm-hmm. And I don't want this to sound arrogant, what I'm about to say. What it should sound is affirming that this is a good book. I've always had a hard time putting into words the fact that I have not struggled when it comes to romantic relationships. I just haven't. Trust me, I have my other struggles in life in abundance.
Yeah,
so
right.
I'm not saying this from an arrogant standpoint, but it's been tough for me to put into words like why I think what I do works with men. I think on the surface, people could be like, oh, well, XYZ, that, this is why it works for you. But it actually is that a lot of the things she talks about in this book are things that have come naturally to me. And I think it's because I was lucky enough to be raised in a certain kind of household with a certain set of values and raised with a certain amount of self-esteem and like an inner confidence that I think surfaces in many of the chapters that she talks about in this book. And I don't mean for that to sound arrogant. I hope that it's not what it sounds like. It's more that when I read this book, I was like, oh, that's something I did without realizing it.
Oh, I totally understand. It's not arrogant. You were just lucky enough to be brought up with those kind of things ingrained.
Yeah. A big one, huge one for me was the chapter about the feminine versus masculine energy, which I think she covers better than anyone I've ever seen. It's a sort of a touchy subject. It's like, you're not feminine enough. It's not really about that. She talks about the yin yang. I have masculine energy and feminine energy. You have feminine energy in you as well, and masculine energy. And it's about finding that balance.
Right.
And reading that chapter, I was like, oh my God, I naturally have this. And I didn't even really know, but I was emanating it. And I think that plays a huge part in why I have not had a hard time finding men who would.
I agree 100%.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Another chapter too is the one on shallowness. I think it ties into the fact that none of my exes look the same. She really talks about how the thing you should be looking for in a person is character and not some laundry list of relatively superficial requirements. And I have to admit, that's another thing that has always come naturally to me, probably because I'm so obsessed with being understood, that I'm like, I don't really care how tall you are. What I want to know is, do you understand me? But yeah. Anyway, highly recommend, not just saying that, not sponsored, and not just because we had Tracy on. No, she was so wonderful. Well, I think that might be it then.
I think we did it. There were still many questions we did not ask.
We had to let her go, but I had so many more things I wanted to talk about. Yeah. She was lovely.
She was great.
Yeah. If you enjoyed what you heard today, you know what we're going to ask of you, and that is to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, follow us on Instagram, leave us iTunes ratings and reviews, and generally do all the things you would do to support a podcast you enjoy. And so that we can continue to get such incredible guests.
Yes.
Because the more we grow, the better the guests get. And I feel like Tracy McMillan, having her on reflects that.
Solid guest.
Yeah. And on that note, I think that's a wrap for this episode of Dear Shandy. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Bye. Dear Shandy.